A good few games that I've played that have had a big impact on me or had me sinking my teeth into them have kind of fallen into my lap. A Circle of Charity was linked to me in a Discord channel by a friend, and both Signalis and Needy Streamer Overload had like one tweet about them that made me look them up and think they looked cool. With these examples, it was either the style or the subject matter that ended up pulling me in. For the small indie game HoleHole, I saw one or two tweets featuring a mouse character standing in a low poly environment, and she had tits so big they covered her torso. So I thought, hey, I like art that's willing to go whole hog into its vision. I'll play it. It's only $1. And past that mouse was a short game that's a touching piece of Ludokino. Now, with these video essays, you might expect a non-spoiler section, but this game is only about an hour long, and again, only costs $1. The effect this game is going for only really works if you play it anyway, so just play it yourself. HoleHole is a game split into two parts, a walk-around adventure segment where you talk to the residents of the hole and eat stuff before descending into the hole. The other segment is visual novel pieces covering various moments in the life of the developer of the game, that is the adventure game segment, and her friend. Neither of these characters are named, so for the sake of clarity, they'll be referred to as Red and Blue. The purpose with the VN segments is to enlighten the design of HoleHole and showing how Red's life is projected onto a project. A good place to start with this would be how the game's concept and setting came to be. At some point in time before the start of summer vacation, Red is lamenting living in a town surrounded by mountains with nothing to do, relating it to living in a hole. In a similar conversation, she asks about how Blue envisions RPG villages. On one hand, Blue's answer of only mentioning talking to villagers and interacting with objects informs the gameplay loop of the game. That being centered around going back and forth between a dungeon and a village, delivering items to villagers. On the other hand, when looking at various towns and villages in RPGs, it's possible to see that the boundaries are sheer walls of land, creating the image of these civilizations somehow sprouting up in some kind of hole.
Hey, yeah? You ever wonder why we're here? It's one of life's great mysteries, isn't it? Why are we here?
With these two inspirations, Red creates what's to be the unimportant setting of HoleHole that she planned to eventually fill with more interesting stuff. It's a cave with various items and structures strewn around this small area. Some areas seem to have some degree of decoration or organization, like this area inhabited by the older dog girl that has some art, a kotatsu, and a TV. Others are kind of just piles of accumulated things, like the overhang that has various beds, or the piles of trash, or the kitchenette with walls of compressed trash. And in the back, the hole that is meant to be a dungeon? Anyway, from this trash, it could be inferred that the few things within the hole are here out of happenstance of people throwing them down here. Neju, one of the mouse girls, also makes it clear that there's nothing to really do down here. She just plays the same game over and over trying to beat her own score. If you've grown up in a small town, the sentiment here shouldn't be unfamiliar. Unless there's some development that comes without your input, some of the only things that you can do is hang out with the same people doing the same things or leave to somewhere more interesting. One of the only mechanics you can engage with is eating. Around the hole and from talking to characters, you can get various food items, and even non-food items, that you can eat. It's not explained well, but you eat these items to raise your stats so that you can win the fights you get into when you go into the hole. In a really short scene, Red is described as a foodie, which would explain where this part of the game came from. For some game designers, their interests and influences bleed into their work pretty noticeably. At the same time, with smaller scale games or development, you can always see those interests incorporated in out-of-the-box ways. like Love Deluxe 1997 debut game, Moon, remix RPG adventure that asks, what if you could talk to these creatures? The other mechanic that's tied to food is that late in the game you'll be given items that you can give to select characters. If you give Neju the fish sausage, she'll show genuine gratitude for it. Part of why food might be an important part of the game is informed by the one item you can't eat or give, a wrapper for cream bread, whose description talks about the main character's memories of their mother buying them cream bread. Even later on, one of the memories Blue has of Red is them eating pizza and watching weird anime. Something Red understood and wanted to reflect in her game was that food helps you grow both physically and improves the spirit. Speaking of influences, one of the trends you might have missed is subjective sleep. One of the characters, Kumane, is always sleeping, but also gives you items despite that. There are also the aforementioned beds. One of the items you can give, a cigarette butt, can be given to Kumane, who afterwards moves over to sleep in one of the proper beds. The other character whose bedding is described is Gomis, who sleeps on the pile of trash you often find her by. Now, that might not seem like that much by comparison, but the topic of sleep and night is important to Red. One of the earliest memories we see Red talk about is her visiting her grandfather in the hospital and how he'd always be asleep. She also shows regret in feeling this disappointment. Another early memory is spent with her sister. One night, her sister holds her, saying that everything was going to be okay and that things would get better. Her voice getting harder to hear over time. At no point is the sister ever seen again, making you believe that this was her last moment alive, and she wanted to spend it taking care of her sister. From this, I think Red sees a special comfort in resting and sleep that she wants to respect. I can understand that. There's a sense of safety and contentment with yourself and with the people around you to be able to fall asleep. She shows this when Blue falls asleep on the train ride back from her and Red's vacation, and Red wants her to be able to sleep, even if they've arrived at their destination. Those first two examples I mentioned might come off as something negative, you know? Visiting a grandparent in the hospital who you don't even really get to talk to, only left with regret about how you felt and acted at that time, and the death of a loved one aren't usually things you'd attach positive ideas to. However, Red herself somewhat addresses this in a conversation she has near the end of summer vacation with Blue. She says that she used to be scared of night, but through being able to have fun at night, her view eventually changed. Such a perspective is quite a thing to have. It takes a lot to see your own losses and turn them into something positive. And loss is something that takes a lot to really understand how it affects you. Within Red's life, it's shown that she's lost family, but there's also a scene where other people are slowly being scrubbed out without a single word to elaborate. From the story being from a small town, it could be people moving away or slowly losing touch with them. Of the characters in the game, the two that seem to have the most development towards them would be the girl who guards the hole, who says she took up being a guard after her father, and gives you cookies she bakes. The other character is Raka, a mouse girl whose older sister who went into the hole but never returned. When you first start going into the hole, she seems annoyed, but eventually finds something brave in you continuing to go down in the hole again and again. The problem is that she eventually decides to go by herself to look for traces of her father who went missing, only for her to come back mangled, never speaking to you again but still holding her post. Most of the characters have one set of dialogue per cycle, but Raka is the only one you need to talk to multiple times to see everything she says. But also, she only has this one bit of dialogue. Unlike everyone else, who will move around and end up having other things to say, she will always be standing in the same place. After winning the single battle of the game, you can get an accessory you can give back to her that was her sister's. On one hearing that was found next to a pile of bones, she chooses to go into the hole herself to die and be with her. It's not hard to see parallels between Red and Raka, both being younger sisters that lost their older sisters at some point. The difference I'd say is that Rocket is the worst outcome of the situation. She wasn't able to ever move on and eventually found the will to meet new people or do something new. She stood there, letting the trauma of her sister's death become her only facet, until proof of her death drew her to throw her own life away. A lot of the characters end up expressing a sort of misfortune in their own right, but are still able to find contentment in one way or another. The difference between this and the two characters that were unable to reconcile with their pasts and as a result threw themselves into danger in the hope that they'd find some abstract closure from things that were already gone. The difference between them and everyone else comes from a point of acceptance and understanding of their circumstances, and making of it what they could instead of making themselves dormant, which ends up playing into something I've not addressed. So, the one aspect of the game I've yet to directly address is the tits. Now, looking at the title and the title screen and the cheap price in the screenshot of the game on the Steam page, your impression might be something along the lines of, what is this? Some kind of a Zorn game designed to make me come in 60 seconds? See, Red, she's the one who chose to make almost everyone some degree of barely clothed and built like a brick house. And the thing is, Red loves women. On the last night of their vacation, Red and her childhood friend, Blue, kissed on the beach, then slept together after eating pizza and watching weird anime. While some people might have problems coming to terms with their sexuality, Red knew what she liked and didn't hold back in doing so. If she liked heavy mouse girls, she put them in her game. There's even a lily next to said mouse girl. And if she hadn't known her sexuality or found a way to express it, she might have even not been able to experience the love between her and Blue. And you know, that ends up being the overall theme Red ended up putting out in the time she could. Every aspect of the game ends up radiating a love for the aspects of everyday life. The food you eat, the rest you take, things and people you get to enjoy and endure, that's all something you can find heart in. In a conversation Neju has with her sister Kinono, she talks about not wanting to believe the past before they fell in the hole was real because she loved the present the most, even saying that the stars are beautiful like cobwebs. A change in her view from an earlier conversation they had where it was corrected that they weren't looking at stars, but instead cobwebs. The lustrous and the blunt can look just as beautiful. Though, something to note is that Red is a special case. Not everyone will be able to grow around their losses and cope with their circumstances in the same way. As you'll know if you played HoleHole or picked up on some of my wording, Red died in a car accident after coming back from summer vacation. This is why the game we play is so simple or underdeveloped. It is literally the unfinished project of someone who was only able to work on it for a few months before passing away. After Red's death, she had a funeral. People left flowers for her, but not everyone was able to cope and continue on like she could. Her parents, having lost both of their children, committed suicide, leading to Red's belongings to be thrown out onto the street. Blue was able to cover her laptop and play through her game. Before Red passed, she was able to implement the battle part of the game. Much like its developer, just as the game was beginning to bloom into something, its development was cut short. Years pass, and Blue eventually happens upon the laptop again and is reminded of the woman she loved and all the time they'd spent together. But she'd moved on. After all this time, she looked back and felt that she really hadn't known who Red really was. But that's okay. She could still place their memories in her work and let anyone who knew her find them through this game. HoleHole is a game about acceptance and appreciation of all the little and big things that make up your everyday life, and how those things shape you. You might be unsure of the future, but the past shouldn't weigh you down. Love the present for what it is. Red is dead. She's gone. But she's on that download page, in that game. She lives on through her and Blue's memories. If you're going to live in a hole, live in the dirt you're surrounded by. Even if what falls in the hole comes at you without your control. It's yours to find value in. It's your life being made in that hole.